God, I love the movies, and every year I love making sure that you guys know about my top 10 favorite underrated movies of the year. These necessarily may not have made my top 10 favorite films of the year, but these are the underrated ones that maybe I've just had in the back of my mind that I always go to recommend to someone when they're like, I need something new that no one else is talking about. These are the movies to jump into, and I'll make sure, guys, to leave a comment and let me know what your guys' top 10 favorite underrated movies of the year were as well. There might be some that I completely missed that I want to see and get your guys' opinions on. And just in general, if you haven't seen any of these films yet, which is the one that stuck out the most to you? It's time to dive in and rank these from the top 10 most underrated films of 2021. This is my personal opinion, and I'm so thankful to be sharing this with you. And coming down on my number 10 is one of the most underrated films I've seen all year long, and that is Violet. This stars the likes of Olivia Munn and Luke Bracey, and even Justin Theroux. It's a movie about a woman who lives with this voice inside her head, always built to live on those fear-based decisions, but one day she must decide to do something a little bit differently, and maybe the voice inside her head, that anxiety that is constantly nagging her to do something else and tearing her down, is totally doing that to her. I found this to be one of the most fascinating movies I've seen this year, not just from a directorial standpoint, but also from a writing, and Olivia Munn's performance in here is excellent. I've been really liking Olivia Munn, but never seen her in a role like this before, and thankfully she gives one of the most underrated performances as well this year. This is one of those independent films that not a lot of people are talking about, but everyone absolutely should be talking about. I loved this for the way that I live with anxiety, and sometimes I feel like I do have that voice, so this film spoke a lot to me, and if you've ever felt that way where you're like, you know, I do have that voice that sits in the back of my head that does tear me down, whether it's with depression or anxiety, or maybe both at the same time, Violet tackles those in such a subjectual manner that I loved. And at my number 9, it is Stillwater. This is a movie that is still stuck with me throughout this entire year. Matt Damon stars in this as a father who must go to a different country to pretty much save his daughter. His daughter is accused of a crime that she committed of murder, and she is in prison, and pretty much out there, some discoveries start to be made. He interacts with a family, and maybe even starts to change for the better. This is a movie that I have been very fascinated with seeing ever since the director had made the movie Spotlight. If you still haven't seen that, it won Best Picture. That is also a very underrated movie not enough people talk about, even though it did win an Academy Award. And Stillwater, for me, Matt Damon just doesn't give one of the best performances of his entire career. This is a film that has twists and turns, and the way that it shifts its narrative is absolutely one of the most fascinating aspects of this entire movie that I wasn't expecting to get. I sat there just in awe of the way that he was able to bring about this nature, and I just sat there going, how in the hell is this director doing it? This movie weaves and bottles over tonal shifts that are absolutely underrated in the way that it is told, and in the direction that the story is actually going in. It is one of the most fascinating character arcs that I've ever seen, and while it's not perfect, it is a movie that has still fascinated me from the first day that I'd seen it to even now after I've done a couple rewatches of it. If you haven't seen Stillwater, again, heavily recommend this one. And at my number 8, it is Coda. Now this one has kind of had more of an uphill battle, it seems. Ever since Sundance it debuted to tons of love, but ever since then it's kind of gone a little bit quiet. I don't hear any of my family or friends talking about it, but maybe if you're in the film community, you have absolutely heard about this. But we need to get the word out about this great coming of age story and family drama all mixed into one. One girl, she is the child of deaf hearing parents, and so her brother is deaf of hearing. There's something that's special about this movie when in the way that it weaves in organically the humor as well as the dramatic avenues of how great of a singer this girl is, but her parents and really no one understands how she is around them because of course, the deaf culture. And for me, the way that this film weaves in and again addresses the deaf culture as a way that is just so beautifully transput into this, as well as seeing this beautiful coming of age story that so other people can understand. It is, of course, just a typical story that maybe doesn't do anything new with the genre, but with the message that it has to say, with the smile it puts on your face, and even with the humor weaved throughout it, you will walk away from this movie not just in tears, but with a giant smile on your face. I'm still in contention for this Troy Kotsur, who plays the father in here. I absolutely need him to be nominated for Best Supporting Actor. He is still one of my favorite performances of this entire year. At my number 7 is one of the most surprising films I've seen of 2021, and that is Pig. Now this gives probably Nicolas Cage's best performance in, I would argue, probably like 10 years. He is so phenomenal in this that if he was nominated tomorrow for the Academy Award, I would say absolutely deserves it. This is a movie that when I saw the trailer, heard the concept, I said, okay, So we're pretty much getting Taken or John Wick, but with Nicolas Cage and a pig. No, that is absolutely completely wrong. While it does dive into a great mythology inside this town, and whether it's with the cooks or the chefs or even in general the underbelly of that kind of criminal nature, there is more to it than just that. It's more than that, because with the performances from Nicolas Cage, who is absolutely incredible in here, the passion, the push, the emotionality he brings to this, it is one of my favorite devastating things that I've seen throughout this. It is a hard film to get through with its slow meandering pacing, but it's one that by the end I felt satisfied and in love with this entire story. It is a journey that I felt emotionally, and it's one that has not gone away from me ever since. It is such a fabulous directorial effort that I cannot recommend enough. And at my number 6, it is probably one of the best, most underrated comedies of the year. Who loves Knives Out, like whodunit type movies mixed with werewolves? That's what you get with my number 6, and that is Werewolves Within. What an underrated comedy that came out this year. Really, I remember seeing a trailer for it, and then like the next week I got offered a screener, and I watched it, and I'm like, this is so much fun playing around with who is the werewolf in this house and who is killing everyone. It is such an utter blast. If you're a horror fanatic, if you love mysteries, you're gonna have fun with that, with as well as a very on-the-nose script that knows exactly what it is. This is the type of movie you're getting with it. I'm trying to stay pretty vague with this so you don't understand what happens throughout this movie, but you are about to have so much fun with this. Before we hit to my top 5, guys, make sure to leave a comment. Once again, I can't wait to see what your most underrated films of the year were, and if you've seen any of these so far, let me know down below what your guys' thoughts are. Which one was your favorite? Do you disagree with me? Let me know down below, as well as I do have a couple honorable mentions to mention, and the first one is The Profile. This is an all found footage movie, all taking place on a Skype laptop about a journalist who is infiltrating a terrorist organization. A very intense movie that I can't emphasize enough. If you haven't seen it yet, you should. So we have is The Courier, which is probably one of Benedict Cumberbatch's best movies that he's ever starred in. This came out of nowhere for me, and it has always become almost one of my favorite films of the year, and you'll probably see it as an honorable mention also on that list, as well as my final honorable mention is The Card Counter. Now, this is, of course, stars Oscar Isaac, Tiffany Haddish, and Ty Sheridan. He also directed and wrote First Reformed with Ethan Hawke, which was absolutely incredible. I really like The Card Counter. I seem to be in the minority with this one, but this is one that I feel like if you're looking for a really interesting character study and probably one of Oscar Isaac's best performances yet, you should absolutely see this. At my number 5, we have Blue Bayou. Now, this movie has actually risen more for me the more that I thought about it. Now, I still stand by my review where I did mention that the directorial effort for here, I didn't feel like was the best. I got a little bit woozy, and some of the choices with the handheld camera angles I thought was absolutely a miss. As well as adding into there, I didn't love some of the moments within the story that actually took away from the emotional impact of it all. But goddamn if the message for this isn't some of the most strongest messaging that I've seen in any movie, honestly, in years. But as well, it is probably the movie that has made me the most emotional and devastatingly emotional by the very end. There's 2 others on here that kind of tie it up for that, but this movie's ending is so hard-hitting. It breaks your heart, it rips it in two, and you just feel like utter shit leaving the theater. But at the same time, leaving in a way that you feel like something needs to change. And this is such a strong directorial effort in that nature, because while I have issues with the technical aspect of this film and some of the script parts of trying to like maybe certain characters that could have been taken out and still gotten the same message, everything else for this movie works wonders, and I can't emphasize enough. Plus, Alicia Vikander is in here, and I love her as an actress. I think she was phenomenal in here as well. If you haven't seen Blue Bayou yet and you want to be destroyed, go see this one. At my number 4, we have The Night House. Now, this came out of nowhere for me, because this was supposed to be at Sundance 2020, and it was there, and I had a ticket for it, but I had heard some scary things about it, and I chickened out, and I did not go to my midnight screening of this. So I had to wait like literally over a year and a half to finally see this movie, and I loved it. This is one of my favorite films of this year as well. It won't be on my top 10 best, but it's in like the top 20. I fucking love this film. It's probably one of my favorite horror films of the year, as well as the way that it scared me with its atmosphere and its personality, and it just every twist and turn, the directorial effort here, the performance from Rebecca Hall. This is a movie that is about a girl who pretty much after the death of her husband starts to find out that there is some more sinister shit leaking around, or is it just her depression? That psychological nature plays around a lot with you, and God, by the end, I was totally invested. I loved The Night House, but this is one that won't be for everyone, but if you can get into it, I think you'll love it. And at my number 3, it is Come On, Come On. This movie should be nominated for a ton of Oscars. Joaquin Phoenix turns in one of his most sincere and heartfelt performances of all time. Woody Norman, who plays the young child in here, who interacts with him, is also fantastic. And it's all about a radio DJ who's going around interviewing kids, but all of a sudden he has to take care of his estranged nephew, who he hasn't really spent that much time with. And just their development, their banter, their chemistry with one another is one of the most fascinating things that I've seen in 2021. I absolutely loved this film to such a hard passion, and I just sat there so emotional and just smiling and getting this really heartfelt sense to it all. And one of the things that I love about this is the messaging about how important our next generations of kids are. Kids understand what are going around in our world, and just hearing those questions and answers, it becomes one of the most special films of 2021, and Mike Mills absolutely deserves a standing ovation for that. Now at my number 2, we have, which is honestly like, I went back and forth with what was going to be my number 1, what was going to be my number 2, but my number 2 is Mass. This is a movie that is about two set of parents, one set of parents being the victims of a school shooter and their son being killed in that school shooting, and the other set of parents, their son was the school shooter who had committed suicide at the school shooting. And leaving from there, the two parents come together to have a conversation. Martha Plimpton, Ann Dowd, Reed Birney, Jason Isaacs are phenomenal in this. Their performances, all of this movie hinges on their performances and in the way that they are able to develop that in such a stylistic way. But their performances are so raw, organically input, and really much just bring such a hardcore passion to this entire script. It's a movie that has stuck with me ever since I saw it back in January, and I've seen it at least 3 or 4 times since then, and still become an emotional wreck from it. It's not one of those movies that bangs you over the head about gun reform and all sorts of things like that. It's more about a story about two set of parents who are trying to get over and move on in their grieving process. I absolutely loved this film. I think the performances should absolutely all be nominated, but also Fran Kranz, who you might know as the hippie dude from Cabin in the Woods, does such a phenomenal job in directing this movie, and I was so satisfied with his direction in here. Bravo to him. I wish this film was being nominated for the Oscars, but I sadly don't see it nominated for anything. Of course, at my number 1 of the year, most underrated film, I saw it back in 2020. I fucking loved it. It is one of my favorite films of that year as well, but I can't talk about it this year since I didn't watch it new this year, but I can talk about it. My most underrated, and my most underrated film of this year is 9 Days. Dear God, if you haven't seen this yet, please treat yourself. Say as vague as possible with this one, but pretty much give you the underlying study of it. Imagine an angel pretty much decides which souls move on to the living and which souls just dissipate into nothing. It's about a man played by, of course, Winston Duke, who is absolutely phenomenal in this, who takes on the role of this angel, interviewing different souls and seeing which one will go on to the living. He has 9 days to decide, and it also has the likes of Benedict Wong, who's, of course, Wong from, like, Doctor Strange and Spider-Man and all sorts of things like that, and he's fantastic in here, but as well as leading in Zazie Beetz, probably gives her best performance yet of her entire career. I've been a big fan of hers, and, of course, Bill Skarsgård as well is incredible. There's a wide variety of cast members who are all getting interviewed for this, but just the conversations throughout this movie are some of the big impactful parts of it all. But I think what this movie reminds you of is, what is the meaning of life? Why do we live as human beings? 9 Days answers those questions, and I absolutely love it. I've done written reviews for this, I've done a giant review for this, and I've talked about this movie constantly. I'm just giving you that one last reminder that do not forget that 9 Days is one of the best films of 2021, and you should absolutely see it because no one's talking about it, and they absolutely should. Guys, that's my top 10 most underrated movies of 2021. Thank you so much for watching this. You guys are seriously all the best. Out of all the lists and all the videos I do, this is one of my favorite ones to do because I get to mention some of my favorite films of the year that maybe don't make my top 10 or maybe already came out last year and I'd seen them then, but I can finally talk about them here and people can kind of get a little bit more of an understanding of who I am. Let me know down below your guys' thoughts. Which films have you seen? Which films do you want to see? Which films did I miss that I should absolutely see? And if you want to get more choices of maybe other films that I've reviewed, make sure to go follow me on Letterboxd. Also, if you want to see films early, head on over to Sandwich on Films. And of course, a big thank you to all of you guys again. Hit that like and subscribe button for more content coming up soon. And until next time, stay classy.